1637. Amsterdam. A single tulip bulb sells for more than a mansion on the canal, 10 times what a skilled craftsman earns in a year. People are mortgaging their homes, selling their businesses, trading everything they own for a flower that'll be dead in a week. Then, in one afternoon, the price drops to nothing. Fortunes vanish, families ruined. An entire economy nearly collapses because of a flower. This is Tulip Mania, the world's first recorded financial bubble, and what happened next changed how markets work forever. The tulip wasn't even European. It came from the Ottoman Empire in the 1550s, brought back by a diplomat named Ogier de Busbecq. He saw these vibrant flowers in Turkish gardens and thought they'd look stunning back home. He was right, but he had no idea what he was starting. By the early 1600s, tulips became a status symbol. Wealthy merchants displayed them in their gardens like trophies. The rarer the color, the more prestigious. Solid colors were common. Striped tulips? Those were extraordinary. Nobody knew why some tulips had those mesmerizing flame-like patterns. Today, we know it was a virus, the mosaic virus, breaking down pigments in the petals. Back then, pure mystery. And that mystery made them priceless. Here's where biology created the perfect storm. Tulips take 7 years to grow from seed to flower, 7 years before you even know if you've got something valuable. But there's a shortcut. Bulbs produce tiny offshoots called offsets. Plant those, you get flowers in just 2 or 3 years. The problem? Each bulb only produces 2 or 3 offsets per year. Demand was exploding. Supply couldn't keep up. Economics 101, scarcity drives value. By the 1630s, tulip trading had completely transformed. You weren't buying flowers anymore, you were buying promises. Futures contracts for bulbs still in the ground. Tulips that hadn't even bloomed yet. Taverns became trading floors. Farmers, weavers, carpenters, people with zero financial experience, suddenly they're tulip speculators. Buying contracts, flipping them hours later for profit. Nobody actually wanted the tulips. They wanted the price to go up. Sound familiar? A single Semper Augustus bulb, the most coveted variety with its red and white flames, sold for 6,000 florins in 1637. That's roughly $200,000 today. One bulb. Not a field of them, one. People started trading everything. A man in Horn traded his entire estate for 3 rare bulbs. Another offered 12 acres of land. Detailed records show one transaction where someone paid 2 loads of wheat, 4 loads of rye, 4 fat oxen, 8 fat pigs, 12 fat sheep, 2 barrels of wine, 4 barrels of beer, 2 barrels of butter, 1,000 pounds of cheese, a bed, a suit of clothes, and a silver cup. For one tulip bulb. Notaries were overwhelmed documenting these insane trades. The entire economy was reorganizing itself around flowers. The Dutch East India Company, the most powerful corporation on earth at the time, watched as its investors pulled money out to chase tulips instead. Windmill operators abandoned their posts. Weavers left their looms. Why work when you could make a year's salary in an afternoon trading tulip contracts at the tavern? But most of these traders had no money. They were buying on credit, signing contracts they couldn't afford, gambling that prices would keep rising so they could sell before payment came due. The entire market ran on borrowed money and pure faith. January 1637. Prices hit their absolute peak. A single bulb of a common variety, nothing special, sold for 20 times what it cost just a month earlier. The acceleration was becoming vertical. Everyone believed prices would climb forever. Then came the auction in Haarlem. February 3rd, 1637, a standard sale of tulip bulbs. Nothing unusual about it. But this time, there were no buyers. Not at the asking price anyway. The auctioneer lowered the price. Still nothing. Lowered it again. Someone in that room realized something terrifying. These bulbs weren't actually worth anything close to what people were paying. And if he realized it, others would too. Panic moves faster than reason. Within days, sellers flooded the market trying to cash out. But there was nobody left to buy. Everyone was trying to sell at once. Prices didn't just fall, they evaporated. That 6,000 florin Semper Augustus couldn't get 50 florins for it a week later. Thousands of people were suddenly holding contracts to buy tulips at prices 10, 20, 50 times higher than anyone would pay now. Contracts they'd signed with money they didn't have. The man who traded his estate for 3 bulbs. Those bulbs were now worth less than a week's wages. The 12 acres of land. Gone for flowers you could buy for the price of a beer. Courts were overwhelmed with cases. Buyers refusing to honor contracts, sellers demanding payment. The government had no idea what to do. This had never happened before. Here's what makes it darker. The virus that created those valuable striped tulips. It weakened the bulbs. Those rare, expensive flowers produced fewer offsets and died younger, so people were destroying their futures for something that was literally dying as they bought it. The aftermath wasn't just financial. It was psychological. An entire society had to confront a brutal question. How did we convince ourselves that a flower was worth more than a house? Dutch writers started publishing pamphlets mocking the speculators. Paintings depicted tulip traders as fools and gamblers. The embarrassment was national. For decades afterward, tulip trader was an insult, another way of calling someone an idiot. But Amsterdam didn't collapse. The Dutch economy survived. Why? Because the real money, the actual wealth of the Dutch Golden Age, was never in tulips. It was in shipping, trade, colonies, the East India Company. Tulip Mania was a sideshow, devastating for those caught in it, but not fatal to the nation. Still, something fundamental had changed. For the first time in recorded history, regular people watched an asset price disconnect completely from reality, then crash back to earth. The psychological scars ran deep. What nobody realized at the time was that this was just the beginning. Tulip Mania established a pattern that would repeat throughout history. The same fever, the same denial, the same devastating crash, just with different assets. Because the real lesson wasn't about tulips at all. It was about human psychology colliding with money and losing every single time. Fast forward to 1720, the Mississippi Company in France. John Law convinced the French government to let him create a bank that could print its own money and sell shares in a company that owned, on paper anyway, all of Louisiana. Shares went from 500 to 10,000 livres in months. Crowds trampled each other trying to buy in. Then it collapsed. Investors lost everything. Law fled the country in disguise. Same year, different country. The South Sea Company in Britain. Shares rocketed from £128 to over 1,000. Isaac Newton, literal genius who discovered gravity, bought in. Then he watched it crash and lost the equivalent of millions. His quote afterward, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." 1929. The Roaring Twenties. Everyone's buying stocks on margin, borrowing money to buy more shares. Stock prices triple in 3 years. October 24th, Black Thursday. Prices start falling. Panic selling begins. Within weeks, billions evaporated. The Great Depression follows. Takes 25 years for the market to recover. Each time people swore they'd learned. Each time a new generation found a new thing to obsess over. Because the pattern isn't about the asset, it's about us. 1999. The dot-com bubble. Companies with no revenue, no profits, sometimes not even a real product, raising hundreds of millions. Pets.com spent $300 million and lasted 268 days. Their Super Bowl ad cost more than their entire revenue. Webvan burned through $800 million delivering groceries nobody wanted delivered that way. Stock prices had nothing to do with reality. A company could add .com to its name and watch shares double overnight. Then March 2000 hit. The Nasdaq crashed 78% over 2 years. $5 trillion vanished. Retirement accounts destroyed. But at least it was over, right? We'd finally learned our lesson about irrational speculation. 2008 would like a word. Housing prices had been climbing for years. Banks started offering mortgages to anyone with a pulse. No income verification, no down payment. Adjustable rates that would explode later, but who cares? Prices only go up. People bought houses they couldn't afford, planning to flip them in 6 months for profit. Banks bundled these garbage mortgages into securities and sold them as safe investments. Rating agencies, paid by the banks, stamped them AAA. Everyone was getting rich. Then people started defaulting. Turns out you can't actually pay a mortgage with no income. Housing prices fell. The securities became worthless. Bear Stearns collapsed. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The entire global financial system almost collapsed. Took $700 billion in bailouts to prevent total meltdown. Millions lost their homes. Unemployment hit 10%. $16 trillion in household wealth just gone. Surely now we'd learned. Surely after watching the global economy nearly die, we'd stop chasing magic beans. 2017. Bitcoin hits $20,000. People are taking out second mortgages to buy cryptocurrency. It's different this time, they said. Limited supply, they said. Digital gold, they said. It crashed to $3,000. Then somehow climbed back and hit $60,000 in 2021. Dropped to $16,000 a year later. Fortunes made and lost on something you can't see, touch, or use to buy groceries in most places. NFTs. People spent millions on JPEGs of cartoon apes. Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. For a receipt saying you own a link to an image anyone can copy. The market collapsed. Those million-dollar apes now worth maybe a few thousand if you're lucky. Every single bubble follows the same script. New thing appears. Early adopters make money. Media covers it. FOMO kicks in. Regular people pile in. Prices disconnect from reality. Someone important says, this is different. It's never different. Then the crash, denial, anger, desperation, collapse. Afterward, everyone asks the same question. How did we fall for this again? Because we're wired wrong for this. Our brains evolved to notice patterns and follow the crowd because that kept us alive on the savannah. See everyone running? Run too. Ask questions later. That instinct works great for avoiding lions. It's catastrophic for investing. We see prices rising and our brain screams, get in before it's too late. We see others getting rich and feel physical pain at missing out. Loss aversion kicks in. The fear of missing the gain becomes stronger than the fear of losing money. Then there's confirmation bias. Once you're in, you only see information that confirms you made the right choice. Warnings become noise. Critics become haters who don't understand. You're not in a bubble. You're early to the future. Until you're not. The truly dark part? The people running these schemes know all of this. They're not confused. They're counting on it. They understand that humans will chase rising prices regardless of underlying value. They know FOMO is more powerful than logic. They pump the asset, wait for the crowd, then dump it on the latecomers. It's the same con tulip traders ran in 1637, just with better technology. Right now, somewhere, the next bubble is inflating. AI stocks, quantum computing, some new crypto scheme, maybe something that doesn't exist yet. People are buying in, prices are rising, everyone's convinced this time is different, and when it pops, we'll act shocked, devastated, betrayed. We'll demand investigations and regulations. We'll write articles about lessons learned. Then 20 years later, we'll do it again with something new. Because Tulip Mania didn't teach us that tulips were overvalued. It taught us that we're all vulnerable to the same delusion. The belief that we've found the one thing that breaks the rules. That this time, gravity doesn't apply. Except gravity always wins. The only question is how many people are still holding flowers when it does. 387 years after tulips crashed, we still haven't figured it out. We've just gotten better at justifying why this time is legitimately different. More sophisticated at explaining why the rules don't apply to us. Every generation thinks they're smarter than the last. That they've learned from history. That their bubble isn't actually a bubble because the fundamentals are real this time. And every generation ends up holding worthless bulbs, wondering how they convinced themselves a JPEG or a mortgage-backed security or a tulip was worth their entire future. The pattern will repeat because the pattern is us. Our greed, our fear, our desperate need to believe we've found the shortcut. No amount of historical knowledge fixes that. We'll keep chasing the next tulip until the end of time, each generation certain they're different from the fools who came before. The real question isn't whether another bubble is coming. It's whether you'll recognize it before you're the one left holding flowers nobody wants.